The wedding photos are still on the wall when I decide to leave. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the argument. Not the thing he said in front of his mother and two of his colleagues at the dinner table last Saturday. Not even the look on his face when he said it. That particular combination of casual cruelty and absolute confidence that I was too small to do anything about it. No. What finally moves me is standing in our hallway at 6:45 in the morning, coffee in hand, looking at the framed photograph of us on the steps of the church. I am wearing a dress that cost more than his car. He never knew that. He never asked. And I think, how many things did he never ask? That's the question that changes everything. Not how could he, not why would he. Just how many things. I count them on the way to work. The coffee in my hand is from our kitchen, the kitchen in the apartment I own. The car that picks me up is charged to an account he has never seen. The building I walk into, 41 floors of glass and steel in the center of this city, has my last name. My real last name, my mother's name, engraved above the entrance in letters you can read from across the street. Dominic has driven past this building. I know because he mentioned it once. "Calloway House," he said. "Old money. Must be nice." And then he changed the subject to his own firm's quarterly projections. I smiled and said nothing. I have been smiling and saying nothing for 2 years. I am very good at it. My grandmother was better. She built the smile into an art form, used it like a second skin, and by the time anyone realized what was underneath it, she had already won. I learned from the best, but I am standing in the elevator of Calloway House, watching the floors climb, and I am thinking that maybe I have been smiling too long. Maybe the point of the smile was never to disappear inside it. Maybe it was always supposed to be temporary, a thing you wear until you don't need to anymore. The elevator opens. Arthur is already at my desk with a folder and a coffee he didn't need to bring but always does. He takes one look at my face and puts the folder down. "What happened?" he says. "Nothing yet," I say. And that I realize is completely true. I should tell you how we met, because otherwise Dominic doesn't make any sense. He made sense at first. That's the honest version. I met him at a charity gala, not the kind I host, the smaller kind, an industry mixer where I was technically attending as a guest rather than a patron. I was wearing a simple black dress. I had left my jewelry at home on purpose. I do this sometimes, arrive at a room and let it show me who sees me and who sees the room. Dominic walked straight toward me. He was handsome. He still is. I want to be fair about this because it matters. The handsomeness was genuine, not performed. He had an easy confidence that wasn't arrogance, at least not yet, and when he spoke to me he was curious in a way that felt real. He asked what I did. I told him I worked in property development, which is true. He nodded, interested. He talked about his own work, something in finance, mid-level consulting. He was good at his job. He was proud of it. That pride wasn't offensive to me. I respect people who work hard. We had dinner 3 days later, then again the following week. By the 3rd month, I realized I was happy. I don't say this lightly. Happy is not a word I use carelessly. My mother was happy exactly twice that I witnessed. Once when her own mother handed her the company, and once when she read to me on a rainy afternoon, and I fell asleep on her shoulder. She was a woman who knew the weight of things. She passed that to me. So when I say I was happy with Dominic, I mean something precise. I mean that his company made ordinary evenings feel inhabited. I mean that he made me laugh, which is harder than it sounds. I mean that for the first time in a long time, I was in a room with someone and not performing. The mistake, and I see it clearly now, was that I assumed he was doing the same. He was. For a while. The first shift was so small I almost didn't catch it. We were 6 months in, and his friend made a joke at dinner about dating above your pay grade. Dominic laughed. Normal laugh, the kind you do when you don't want to make a thing of something. But afterward, on the walk home, he asked me what my salary was. Not in a rude way, casually, like curiosity. I told him a number, a real one, from one of my smaller consultancy contracts. Not a lie. Just a very, very incomplete truth. He seemed satisfied. He squeezed my hand. We kept walking. I don't know why I didn't tell him more then. Habit, maybe. My grandmother always said, let people show you who they are before you show them what you have. She wasn't suspicious by nature. She was just careful. I inherited the carefulness without always questioning it. What I should have done, and didn't, was ask him what answer would have satisfied him either way. Because I think, and this took me 2 more years to understand, any answer was always going to fit into a story he was already telling about himself, about us, about what we were to each other. And in his story, I was a pleasant supporting character. We got married 14 months after we met. Small ceremony, his family more present than mine. Mine is either passed on or scattered in private. Margot, his mother, wore a pale cream suit and shook my hand rather than embracing me. I noticed. Margot is the kind of woman who calculates everything before she feels it. In another life, under different circumstances, I might have liked her. She has a precision I recognize, but her precision is in service of her son's ambition, and her son's ambition is in service of a very specific image she built for him before he was old enough to question it. The image is Dominic, successful, respected, married to a woman who reflects well on him. Not too much, not too little. Ornamental in the right ways, malleable in the important ones. The honeymoon was lovely, genuinely. He was present for it, laughing, unhurried, the version of him I'd fallen for. I remember lying on a beach in the south of France watching him sleep in the afternoon sun, and I thought, this is the person. Not a calculation. A feeling. Feelings are not wrong. They are just sometimes early. We came home. We moved into the apartment, my apartment, though he didn't know its provenance, just that it was mine. And we started the domestic machinery. Routines, groceries, dinners with his colleagues where I dressed carefully and spoke less than I might have. I understood quickly what role I was meant to play. The quiet wife, the pretty one who worked in property, not impressive enough to be threatening, not uncertain enough to be a liability. I fit the role neatly. I almost fit it without noticing. Almost. Serena noticed before I did. She has been my friend since university, when we were both 20, and she has never once pretended not to see something simply because it was inconvenient. It is her best quality, and occasionally her most irritating one. She came for lunch 6 months into the marriage, sat across from me in the kitchen of my apartment, and watched me for approximately 4 minutes before saying, "You've gotten smaller." "I haven't lost weight," I said. "That's not what I mean." I put my fork down. I looked at her. Serena has this quality of stillness that demands honesty in return. You cannot deflect someone who is simply watching you tell the truth. "He has very specific ideas about how things should be," I said finally, "and you're accommodating them. I'm observing them." She picked up her glass. "Vivienne, what's the difference?" I didn't have a good answer then. I think about that question for months afterward, in the small margins of days, while I'm reading, while I'm in meetings, while I'm lying next to Dominic in the dark. The difference between accommodating and observing. Between choosing to stay small and choosing to watch. It takes me time to understand that I have convinced myself I am doing the second when I have, in fact, been doing the first. That understanding arrives slowly. It doesn't come as a revelation. It comes as a slow, rising tide. Then comes the dinner. The dinner happens on a Saturday. Dominic's colleagues, 2 men from his firm, their wives, and Margot. I cook because I enjoy cooking and because Dominic has let it be known he has a wife who cooks, and I don't object to this enough to stop. Everything is fine until dessert. One of the wives, a cheerful woman named Diane, who means no harm in any direction, asks what I do exactly. "Property development," I explain. "Investment and acquisition." She nods, interested. Margot cuts in. "Vivienne works hard for what she has," she says, in the tone of someone complimenting a child. "It's admirable, very grounded. Dominic is the one with the ambition in this family." The table laughs. Not cruelly, just reflexively. The laugh of people who agree with a hierarchy they haven't thought to question. I look at Dominic. He is smiling. His smile says, This is how it is, and you know it is, and you are fine. His smile has a whole sentence in it. The sentence is, stay where you are. I pick up my wine glass. I take a sip. I say nothing. But something in me, something very old and very quiet, something I inherited from 2 generations of women who built things in silence, that thing stops accommodating. It simply stops. And I think very clearly in the middle of this dinner with these people who have organized the world so neatly without asking me anything. You have no idea what you are sitting inside. I start paying closer attention after that. Not dramatically. I don't become a spy in my own marriage. I simply look more carefully, listen more completely, and what I see, now that I'm looking, is a very coherent picture. Dominic talks about money constantly, not in a crass way, in the way of someone who is always keeping score. He mentions salaries unprompted. He ranks restaurants by what they signal rather than what they serve. He talks about promotions, about other men's promotions, about who has what and what it means. He talks about Celeste, his colleague, with a particular kind of admiration that I register without comment. Celeste just closed a deal with the Hargrove account. Celeste is being considered for a senior partnership. I ask once to meet Celeste. He deflects. Not obviously. Just redirects. I let it go. I file it. What I'm more interested in, honestly, is the shape of his assumptions about me. Because I realize now that Dominic has built a very detailed picture of who I am, and he has never once needed to check it against reality. He knows I earn a solid but unremarkable salary. I work in property. I have no family money. He made this calculation early, from the smallness of my wedding and the absence of expensive relatives, and he drew his conclusions. All of this is comfortable for him. The comfort is important. A woman with more than him is a variable he hasn't accounted for. And Dominic hates unaccounted variables. I know what I'm going to do. I just don't know exactly when. Then Arthur calls me on a Tuesday morning and says, "Vivienne, the Hargrove Group is asking about the Eastern acquisitions. They want to meet you directly, not a representative. They want you." I think about the name Hargrove. I think about Celeste. I think about Dominic at the dinner table, smiling. "Schedule it," I say. "And Arthur, use the Calloway House boardroom." I tell Dominic I have a meeting that runs late on Thursday. He doesn't ask where or with whom. This is not unusual. He stopped asking about my work months ago, once he concluded that its details were not relevant to anything he was tracking. I am simultaneously invisible and present in his life, a feature, not a person. Something that keeps the household warm and the social calendar managed. I dress for the Hargrove meeting the way I rarely dress for anything in my private life, completely as myself. A structured charcoal suit, my grandmother's cufflinks, nothing borrowed, nothing softened. Arthur meets me in the lobby. He looks at me the way he sometimes does when I remind him of her, my grandmother, and he says nothing, which is the highest compliment he knows how to give. The Hargrove representatives are 3 people in good suits who arrive expecting to negotiate. Within 15 minutes, they are not negotiating. They are listening. There is a difference, and the room knows it. By the end of the hour, the Eastern acquisitions portfolio has expanded by 30%, and Hargrove's lead partner has asked for my direct number. I ride the elevator down alone and stand in the lobby of my own building and feel, for a moment, exactly like myself. It is disorienting. How long has it been since I took up the space I'm owed? That evening, I cook dinner, and Dominic asks me if I'm tired. I say a little. He tells me about his day, a deal he's been managing, a frustration with a colleague. I listen. I ask a question. He seems satisfied. He does not ask about my day. He never asks about my day. I realize quietly that this no longer hurts me. It has shifted into data. I call Serena on a Friday night while Dominic is at a work event. I am sitting on the floor of the spare bedroom. Don't ask me why the floor. Sometimes I just need to be low to the ground, with a glass of wine, and I tell her everything. Not just the dinner. All of it. From the beginning. The salary question. Margot. The way I started making myself smaller and called it strategy. The Hargrove meeting. The photograph in the hallway. Serena listens without interrupting. which is how I know she is taking it seriously. When I finish, she is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "What do you want to happen?" Not what are you going to do? What do you want? I close my eyes. I think about this. I think about the girl who built her first real estate model at 19 at her grandmother's kitchen table. I think about the woman in the boardroom yesterday who took up every inch of the space she was in. I think about the wife at the dinner table who picked up her wine glass and said nothing. I think about who I was in chapter 1 of this story, and who I am right now, sitting on the floor of a room in my own apartment, asking myself what I want. I want him to know, I say. Not as a weapon. I just want him to know. Know what? What he married. I pause. What he thought he had and what he actually has. And then I want to watch him decide what to do with that. Because whatever he decides, that will tell me everything. Serena is quiet again. Then, that's either the most restrained revenge I've ever heard of, or the most profound act of honesty. Maybe both, I say. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, I say. They're really not. The moment arrives in a way I didn't plan. Dominic's firm is hosting an event, an annual gala at the Ashford Hotel, the kind of thing that matters to him intensely, because the right people will be there, and how he presents himself will be noticed and cataloged. He talks about it for 2 weeks. He picks my dress, or tries to. I smile and wear what I choose. The evening is fine until we reach the reception line, where I come face to face with the Hargrove lead partner, Thomas Hargrove himself, who lights up when he sees me in a way that is warm and immediate and clearly personal. "Vivienne," he says, and takes my hand in both of his. "I didn't know you'd be here. I've been meaning to reach out about the coastal portfolio." I smile. "The real one. Thomas, good to see you." Dominic is very still beside me. Thomas, who is a decent man and does not know he is standing in the middle of something, says conversationally, "Your instincts on the Eastern expansion were extraordinary. We're expecting a 15% return inside of 18 months. I said to my board, Callaway House does not miss." He moves on. People do move on at these events. Dominic does not move for a moment. Then he turns to look at me. I meet his gaze. I don't explain. I don't soften it. I just look at him and let him have the moment. "Callaway House," he says. "Yes," I say. "That's your building." It isn't a question, but I answer it anyway. It was my grandmother's. It's mine now, has been for 6 years. The sound he makes is not quite a word. "The apartment," he says, "is mine, yes." And he stops. Looks at the room, something is moving behind his eyes. Calculation, yes, but also something that might be the beginning of shame. "How long have you known that I didn't know?" "Since approximately the 3rd week of our relationship," I say. "When you asked me my salary and seemed relieved by the answer." He stares at me. "I didn't lie to you, Dominic. I just didn't tell you everything, because I wanted to know who you were first." I pick up a glass from a passing tray. "I think I know now. We don't fight at the gala. I wouldn't do that to him, or rather, I wouldn't do it to myself. A public scene is not the shape of anything I want." We drive home in silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where 2 people are very aware of the space between them. At home, he pours a drink. He stands in the kitchen, my kitchen, which he is now understanding is my kitchen, and he looks at me with an expression I haven't seen before. It is complicated. It has anger in it, and I expected that. But it also has something else. Something closer to vertigo. "You let me believe you needed this," he says. "This life. Me." "I didn't need it," I say. "I wanted it. There's a difference." "That's not a small difference, Vivienne." "No," I agree. "It isn't." He sets the glass down. I feel like a fool. I look at him carefully. Here it is, the moment I have been watching for. The moment where he decides. Does the shame turn outward into anger, directed at me for the humiliation of it? Or does it turn inward and become something honest? "You weren't a fool," I say, and I mean it. You made assumptions. We both did. You knew mine. Yes, I did. He is quiet for a long time. What were yours? I think about this. What were my assumptions? That he would eventually ask. That the man who had been genuinely curious about me in the beginning would stay curious. That the warmth of the early months was the truth of him, and the rest was just pressure, circumstance, his mother's voice in his head. I assumed, I say slowly, that you would want to know me. Eventually. The quiet after that is its own answer. He stays at his colleague's place for a week. He doesn't say it's Celeste's, and I don't ask. I have, by this point, asked everything I need to ask. The week is strange. The apartment feels different without his presence, not emptier exactly, more spacious. I move through the rooms and notice things I'd forgotten were there. A book I'd left half-read on the windowsill, a sketch of the coastal property I'd done in pencil during a meeting and then carried home and forgotten. Small proofs of myself, accumulated quietly over 2 years. Arthur comes to the apartment on Wednesday evening with Thai food and no agenda. We eat at the kitchen table, and he tells me about my grandmother. He does this sometimes, offers her to me in small portions when I need her. He tells me about the year she bought the Eastern District parcel that everyone said was worthless. How she sat in exactly the negotiation room and made everyone else feel, somehow, that they had won while she took everything she came for. She would have thought you handled the gala very well, Arthur says. I didn't plan it that way, I tell him. She didn't always plan things either. She just knew when to let things be seen. He pauses. You do too. You just forget that you're allowed to. I put my chopsticks down. I sit with that for a while. Serena calls later that night and asks if I'm okay. I think I'm better than okay, I say, which is a strange thing to feel right now. Maybe, she says, it's not strange at all. Maybe this is just what it feels like to stop pretending you're smaller than you are. I stand at the window after I hang up and look at the city, this city that has my family's name on one of its buildings, and I let myself be the size I am. Just for a minute, just to remember what it feels like. Dominic comes back on a Sunday morning. He calls first, which is new. He asks if he can come by. I say yes. He sits at the kitchen table with his coat still on, like he isn't sure he's staying. He looks tired. Not manufactured tired, genuinely tired. The kind that comes from sitting inside an uncomfortable truth for several days. I talked to my mother, he says. I wait. She told me I should cut my losses. He pauses. That's the phrase she used. Cut my losses, like you were a failed investment. I feel something shift in me, not anger. Something more precise, a kind of clarity. What did you say to her? I ask. He looks at his hands. I told her she didn't know what she was talking about. Another pause. I think it's the first time I've ever said that to her. I don't say anything. I let that sit between us. I've been thinking, he says, about the question you asked, about assumptions. He looks up. I assumed you needed me in a way that made me feel better about what I was offering. I know that. I can see it now. I couldn't before. He exhales. I'm not saying this to excuse anything. I just want to say it clearly, because I don't think I've ever said anything clearly to you about this. You haven't, I agree. Simply, without cruelty. Are you... He starts, stops. Do you want to... Is this something that can be... I don't know yet, I say. I need you to understand that I'm not going to decide that from inside a version of this marriage where I'm playing a supporting role. I will not do that again. He nods slowly. He is hearing this differently than he would have heard it 2 weeks ago. I would need you to actually see me, I say. Not manage me. Not organize me into your story. See me. That requires asking questions you haven't been asking. I know, he says quietly. I'm not sure you do yet, but I think you're starting to. There is one more conversation I need to have before anything resolves. Margot calls me directly on Monday. I almost don't answer. I decide I will. She cuts straight to it. I assume you're planning to use your position to make things difficult for Dominic. No, I say. You have every... I know what I have, I say calmly. That's not what I'm interested in. A pause. Then, what are you interested in? I think about this. I think about the woman across from me in everything. Controlling, transactional, fiercely protective of a son she has unwittingly damaged by loving him incorrectly. I'm interested in whether or not you're capable of letting him be something other than the image you built for him, I say, because he might be. I haven't decided yet, but you keep reducing him every time he might expand, and I think you know that. The silence is very long. I wanted good things for him, she says finally. Her voice has shifted. Something real has surfaced. I know, I say. And I do. That's not the same as knowing what good things look like. She doesn't respond to that. But she doesn't hang up either. We sit in the silence for a moment, two very different women who have been, in different ways, invisibly managing the same man. Then she says carefully, he always admired you. Before he understood what you were, he admired you before he knew. I know that too, I say. That should count for something. It does, I say. It's why I'm still having this conversation. 6 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, Dominic and I drive out to the coastal property. His idea. He asked 3 days ago if I would show him something of mine, something real. He didn't mean the building or the portfolio spreadsheets. He meant something I cared about. I thought about it for a day. Then I said yes. The coastal property is a stretch of land my grandmother acquired in 1987, overlooking a cliff above the sea, currently the subject of a development proposal I've been sitting on for 2 years, because the right approach hasn't come to me yet. It isn't glamorous. It's muddy and windswept, and the fence has a broken post I keep meaning to have fixed. Dominic stands at the edge of it, looking out at the water. He has his hands in his pockets. The wind is doing something architectural to his hair. He looks different out here, stripped of the context I usually see him in. What are you going to do with it? He asks. I'm not sure yet, I say. Something quiet. I don't want to fill it up with noise. He nods. He looks at it for a while longer. It's beautiful. Yes, I say. It is. He turns to look at me. The sea is loud around us and there is cold, salt air on everything, and he has an expression I haven't seen before. Not the calculating smile, not the managed warmth of early courtship. Something new. Something that might be the beginning of him actually seeing me, rather than the version of me he filed away. I'm sorry, he says. I want to say it here, in a place that's yours. I think that matters. I let myself receive it. I don't deflect, and I don't immediately absolve him, because neither of those would be honest. It does matter, I say. I spent 2 years with you, and I never once asked about this. He gestures at the land, at the sea, at everything. I was so busy making sure you fit into my life that I never looked at yours. No, I say. You didn't. I want to. He says it simply, not as a promise of perfection, as an intention that is still forming. I don't know if I'll always get it right, but I want to actually look. I study his face for a moment, this face I have slept beside for 2 years, and understood and misunderstood in equal measure. Then ask me something, I say. Right now. Ask me something you don't know. He thinks about it. He takes it seriously, which matters. Then he says, What did your grandmother tell you about this place? Something in my chest opens, just slightly, just enough. She told me, I say, that the most valuable land is the kind that doesn't announce itself, that the best things hold their worth quietly and wait for someone patient enough to understand them. He is quiet. He looks at the sea. Then he looks at me. I understand, he says. I don't know if he means the land. I think he means me. I put my hand in his, standing at the edge of something that has been waiting, like the land, like me, for exactly this kind of patient attention. The wind comes off the sea and wraps around us both, and I take up every inch of the space I am owed.